Hey everybody, my name's Ben and welcome to my ultimate PUBG controller settings guide for 2023. Today we are going to cover all things settings for PUBG on console, and I'll put a full chapter listing in the video description down below so you can skip straight to the parts that you want to see by clicking on the video timeline. I've got a whole bunch of topics to go through, including talking about the controller I use, my sensitivity settings, my custom bindings that allow me to take meds and crouch more easily, and I'll also highlight some important gameplay settings that can make your life much easier on PUBG on console. First up is my controller. I recently moved from a Power A to an Xbox Elite 2, and that has been working really well for me. The Power A was a good budget solution for a while if you want a controller with paddles or buttons on the back, but I had a lot of problems with my paddles breaking and rendering parts of the controller useless. I got many years out of my old Elite 1 back in the day, so it's great to finally be back on the Elite 2. Given the premium price point, I don't actually really use many of the fancy features available. It does give the option for up to 4 paddles on the back if you wish, but I just like playing with one, and I'll go over what I use that for a bit later in the video. I don't think there's any particular controller out there that's going to be a complete game changer to your PUBG ability, but certainly having one with the option for more controls on the back can be useful. That said, there's plenty of players out there who play much better than I do and are absolutely slaying on everyday bog standard Xbox controllers. When you go to play with your settings in PUBG, you're going to find a few different options. First up, you have settings and then controller settings. Controller settings menu is used for setting up custom controls and changing what buttons do, and we're going to come to that a little bit later in the video. The main section to look at initially is going to be just settings, and in there you're going to find your controller sensitivity settings, as well as stuff like dead zone and changing button presets. The different presets available are Type A, Type B, and Type C, and predominantly the main differences between those are Type A, when you press the left trigger, it's going to toggle into ADS and then back out. On Type B, using the left trigger is a hold to aim down sights, and then you let go and you aim back out. And then Type C, you end up using all 4 top buttons if you're playing in kind of a claw grip style. I'd say Type B is probably the most commonly used. Type A, I think, is still the default. I used to play on Type A for a while. Now I play on Type B and swear by it, but some players still do find Type A more natural, and that works well for them. It depends what other games you've played before you come to PUBG. On here, however, mine says custom because I've made some changes in the other menu. Like I said, we'll look at that in a little while. The next 2 settings are personal preference, invert X and invert Y. I don't really know anyone who plays with invert X, but invert Y, I am one of those. I use invert Y, so I push up to look down and down to look up. It makes sense in my head. Most people probably don't do that, but you don't need to copy me. It's not going to make you any better. Dead zones, these are a bit more important, and you will want to change these. This is basically the amount of input you need to put into the stick in order to move something on the screen. So if you put your dead zone up really high, then when you push the stick, it's going to take loads of input before it actually starts moving. If you put it down really low, it's going to be a lot more snappy and sensitive. It seems kind of insane that it goes all the way up to 90. I have mine on 8 at the moment. If you can get them down to like 4 or 5, then great. But what you might notice if you have them really low is you could see stick drift. If I put mine down to like 0 and then we go back into the game, you're probably going to see it. A little bit of drift there. You can see my crosshair just moving. If I open the map and the cursor, you can see my cursor starts to move, and any controller is going to do that if you have it super low like that. So if you're having a bit of drift, then just put those up until that drift goes away, and that should be your sweet spot. Vibration's completely up to you, on or off, however you want to play. And then if you go along with the right trigger onto the sensitivity menu, this gives you all of the other options to customize your experience. Forward running and movement sens I have on 40 and 80. I've played around with these a lot over the years. This setting for me just feels nice and fluid. You kind of start moving quite easily, but not too weirdly. If you have them at other values, it can feel a bit jerky. So I think this works quite well, but it's kind of personal preference really. Vertical sens, one of the more important ones. This is basically going to be how much vertical input you need to put in to look up and down, and also to control recoil. So I have mine on 70. You can see, I can control that pretty well. This is what I'm used to playing with. But if I suddenly put that up to a higher setting or down to a lower setting, then you can see as soon as I start looking around, my right stick is now insanely sensitive. And when I try and control it, I keep slamming my aim down into the ground because I'm just not used to using the stick like that. Conversely, if I put it down really low, the opposite will happen. My screen will feel sluggish. My aim will feel weird as well. My advice to that would be to find a value somewhere under 100 and just stick with that. If you keep changing it, then it's going to keep throwing your muscle memory off and your brain's going to have to readjust to push the stick just the right amount. General sens is your sensitivity when just looking around. So just like this, your kind of everyday normal sens. The higher you have this, the snapper it will be to spin around. Obviously, because PUBG on console is a game with no aim assist, the goal is really to have this as high as you can manage for looking around and increasing visibility, but not so high so that you're spinning around and out of control. You want to be able to quickly snap onto targets, but without spinning past them and looking too far. This training mode you can find in the training room is a really handy way to practice some of these, by the way. You can come in here and you can shoot targets like this, and you can try and work out if you're maybe snapping too far. If you keep snapping too far past the targets, then you've probably got a bit high. If you're sluggishly trying to bring it over and you feel like you can't look around very quickly, then maybe you've got it a bit too low. Certainly coming into this game mode in between changing settings or whilst you adjust your settings is a really nice way to get them refined, and it's something I do pretty much every time I start playing now. I do it just as a bit of a warm-up to get myself ready for a session. Even just a couple of rounds can help shake off the rust. If you want to find that training mode in the training rooms, by the way, you can walk over to some of these helipads and press a button to go into it by pressing X, or if you open the map, you can highlight it, this bit down here, aim sound lab, click in the right stick, and you'll appear in the room. You can then select sound training or aim training. That one we were just looking at was the aim training. There's kind of two different ways to go with how you pair your general sens and your ADS. I have a sort of medium to medium high general sens and then a sort of relatively low ADS. Some people like to go really, really high with general and very, very low with ADS, or kind of the other way. You have very high ADS sens and then very low general sens. Because of the way mine is set up, I tend to aim between targets with general and then re-ADS rather than dragging my scope around like this. You don't really see me doing this because, you know, my ADS is quite slow. It's pretty sluggish to be doing this, and if I try and shoot baddies like this too much, you know, it's just going to get me killed. Whereas in reality, what I am doing is more like this. I'll aim in, then I'll look over here and shoot this guy, and then look at this guy, and then I'll look at this guy. So I'll come back out of my ADS in between most of the times that I shoot, unless they're super close together. And that's just kind of how I play. If you like to keep your ADS engaged and drag it across the screen, then you're going to want to run a much higher aim down sight sensitivity on your 1X. So that's general. Vehicle driver I just have on 10. It doesn't really matter too much, just how you look around when you're in a vehicle. Aim acceleration is kind of personal preference. I used to use it off. Now I have it on a very low setting, which I think works well for me with my low sensitivity settings. Aim acceleration basically means if you push the stick to an extreme side, then rather than moving at a consistent speed, it'll actually speed up the more you push it to the extreme. So if you've got quite a low sens and someone's really in close to you and you need to turn sharply, if you whack your stick right over, your character will actually turn faster than they normally would. It can be quite handy for those situations. If you already run fairly high sensitivity, then you don't really need it. You might as well turn it off. I like to run just a very low bit, but again, it's personal preference. Over the shoulder aiming sense, I have on 8. This is for when what I call soft aiming, so aiming like this. Trying to find that balance. Mine is sort of a little bit sluggish. You're generally firing people quite close up with this, and I don't want to sort of spin around and panic too much. If I'm shooting people within a couple of meters of me, then I'm just going to be hip firing anyway, so I'll just be using my general sens. So 8 works well enough for me for that. Inventory cursor sens I have at 6. I've never changed this. It actually has no effect on how I play, because when I use my menus, I tend to use just the D-pad and I use the right and left triggers. If you didn't know, using the right and left triggers will scroll up or down 6 at a time, and then you can just select the next one with the D-pad. I never actually use the right stick for selecting things. That's what that setting changes. If you hold it down, it's going to make that slower or faster. As for all of my optics sens, I've got my 1X at 7, my 2X at 7, and my 3X also at 7, 4X at 6, and then 6 at 5, 8 at 5, and the 15X at 4. So as I mentioned a minute ago, this training mode in the training room is a really nice way to practice your settings, and it even gives you your sensitivity settings in the menu when you're selecting your loadout in the training room or adding ammo. You can just quickly tweak them here on the fly. If you want to practice with something, you can change your 1X down and then have a go with that and see how it feels. There's a couple of other useful places to check out in the training area. One of them is the car area you can come to here. This is quite useful for practicing tracking targets. There's these cars you can shoot here, and then you can practice shooting them as they go past. It gives you a little red indicator if you've landed a driver side headshot or a driver side connection. The other ones will pop up white, and a nice way of just making sure you're able to move your aim consistently across a moving target like this. Another useful area is the 200-meter range up here. Of course, there are other longer ranges available, but this one works quite nicely for sort of medium range. There's some moving targets. It also tends to be quite quiet up here, so you don't have to worry about other players too much. And there's all these little moving targets you can spray at. and have a bit of fun. Now, the other settings menu we talked about earlier is the controller settings one you can find here, and in that you can change all sorts of things. You can select one of these default presets to build from, and then you can go onto any of these buttons and you can select it, and then you can select all of these other stuff and basically change what this button does. I can make up on the D-pad be ADS, I can make it do a quick marker or be sprint, or all sorts of different things. How you customize these is entirely up to you. The main one I have changed, you'll notice here, is that I have crouch down on the D-pad, and then B for me just goes prone. The little green marker indicates that it's a hold, so this is hold to crouch rather than toggle to crouch. And the reason I have this set up like this is that down on the D-pad is what I have bound to the single paddle on my controller. So when I press down on the D-pad and then let it go, my character will crouch. Or also if I just hold in my paddle and let it go, then my character will crouch and stand up. What this means is that if I basically just squeeze in the left-hand side of my controller, so I squeeze down left trigger and the paddle on the back of the left-hand side of my controller as well, then I ADS and I crouch in one fluid action, and then I un-ADS and stand up again in a fluid action. So this is why you see me pretty much always crouching. Whenever I spray, I'm always just straight up and down in a very fluid way. I don't have to reach over and press anything else. This has been a real game changer for me. Crouching massively reduces your recoil when you fire, so I'd really recommend crouching as often as you can when you do fire at enemies. If you don't have a controller with paddles on the back, you can still make this work. You could play with a claw grip, for instance. If you maybe set LB as hold to crouch, then you could use your two fingers on top of the left hand side of your controller to do ADS and crouch on the two bumper buttons and do exactly the same thing. The other really handy thing to know about in these menus is clicking in the right stick will take you to the combination pages, and this allows you to basically set up all of these hotkeys here. You can use LB and Y, LB and X, etc., LB and D-pad, and again if you press RB up here you can do the same for RB and buttons as well. Once you set up these hotkeys, you can then use them to perform these quick actions. You can see I have first aid kits and stuff set up here, so what it means is if I'm in game and I press LB and X, I'll start taking an energy drink. If I do LB and B, I'll take a painkiller, or I can take a bando, or I can take a first aid without having to open my inventory, without having to open the med menu or anything like that. It's a really nice quick way to just be able to take meds on the fly without doing anything else. You can also use this for selecting throwables. You can use it for changing the seat in vehicles. I have one set up to change to the driver's seat, and you can even use it to trigger different emotes and things like that as well. Limited interact, by the way, you can see down here is the control that will skin vehicles and also pick up knocked teammates or enemies. For some reason it doesn't seem to let you bind it to anything you want, but I found I was able to bind it to LB and L, and then that cleared up my other LB ones here to use for my meds. So lastly, I'm just going to quickly run through some of the other settings available in the game so I can give you some tips on useful ones to use there. Colorblind mode, I run on default. There are 4 different options and they make things a different color. They also make blood a different color. Some players find that quite useful for helping spot things out. If you're struggling with seeing blood, try one of these other options. It might help you out a little bit. You can also change your crosshair color. You can select to hide the nicknames in the kill feed. Keep in mind this won't make you anonymous to other players. It just anonymizes your own kill feed. You know, if you don't want to use it to influence how you might play the game, seeing different people, it will just make them all anonymous. You can turn on and off network debug, so you can see the stuff like up in the top left on my screen now, your ping and packet loss. Loot flash effect I have on glow. You can make it pulse if you want. It's entirely up to you. It's just how loot looks on the ground. Over on the function tab, there's all sorts of stuff you can change here. If you put this on custom, you can change your reticle type. So this is my red dot. I can make it look different, or I could change my hollow. I can change my 2x. There's all sorts of different ones you can select here. There's also different colors on some of them. As well as that, you can also change the brightness, so you can make them dimmer or brighter if you wish. Further down on this page, you can change the default firing mode. So I've got most of mine, I think, on full auto. A couple down here on single fire. This means if I pick up a P18C or a Scorpion, it will be on full auto straight away. Same for ARs, same for SMGs. If I take a DMR, then it's going to be on single fire. So that's going to be like an MK14 or a VSS. And then shotguns you can have on single auto or burst as well. TPB aim camera position. This is the position that you reset to every time you go into a over shoulder aim. Mine's on reset to right shoulder. Auto reload I find very useful, so whenever you've emptied a mag, as soon as you've pressed the trigger again, it will automatically reload. Auto equip attachments I would really recommend having on. This is basically when you pick up attachments off the floor, they'll automatically get equipped to any guns that have available slots in your inventory. I have scopes turned off. You can have that on if you want, but I prefer to put those on manually so it doesn't put them on a weird gun. Auto replace attachments, again, very, very useful. This is if you switch a gun with one on the floor, it'll automatically take all all the attachments off your current gun and put them on the new one rather than chucking them on the floor with the other one that you just got rid of. Weapon skin does what it says on the tin. It just puts your own weapon skin on things that you pick up that are already skinned. Hide helmet. Keep in mind this only disables this for you. It means other players, they'll still see your helmet as normal. You can't hide the fact that you're wearing a level 3 helmet. But if you want to see your cool in-game hat that you've spent some money on, then you can enable this setting and you'll see your character's head or your character's hat instead of whatever helmet you're wearing. Radio message and all this kind of stuff. It's quite useful to know. I have my quick ping enabled like this. A lot of people ask me how I use the quick ping. This basically means I can just click in the right stick once and it'll place a marker down on the map. If you have it set up differently, you might need to double click or press and hold or whatever. But option 1 and enable works really nicely for me. Continuous item use just means your character will keep taking an item once it's finished. So bandos, that's quite useful. I don't have it on for other things, but for doing a chain of bandages, it does make it a little bit easier. Action queuing, I've disabled. This came into the game a bit late in the day. I used it for a while, but I found it was having an impact where it's causing other bugs and issues. So I just disable mine and that keeps life a little bit simpler. Highlight recommended ammo and equipment is a newish one. You can have it on. It will put like highlighted stuff for ammo for like the gun you need or things that you need that are an upgrade on what you have. I don't really like it, but I know plenty of people who do use that. The others tab you don't really need to worry about unless you're playing custom games and hosting them as an observer. These are basically the observer settings, so you can spectate a custom game and have all these different HUD options. Death cam is on here. You can have this enabled or disabled. Mine's enabled, but I never ever watch it. The only thing I'll add is that death cam does not in any way accurately show what happened whatsoever, so don't ever use it to judge when you think someone's doing something dodgy or cheating. Death cam doesn't mean anything. Ignore it. It's not useful in any way other than roughly knowing where someone was when they've killed you when you had no idea. Ignore their sprays, ignore their aim. It's completely meaningless. Over on the audio tab, it doesn't really matter too much. You can set this however you want. My master isn't normally at 20. That's just because I'm in the training room. Normally it's on 100. And voice chat settings are pretty self-explanatory. And then finally on the graphics tab, again, nothing too crazy here. FOV, I've got on 90, which I think might be default. I don't play FPP that often. I do go into FPP during games a fair bit, but 90 has always just been fine for me. Brightness I have up on 100 for every map, and then anti-aliasing I have on TAA because that's the good setting that you can play on the Xbox Series X that I play on. You'll probably have different settings available to you depending on which console you play on. So that's everything for today. Hopefully you found some of that useful, and if you have any questions at all about any of the topics covered, then drop a comment down below or just jump onto my live stream on twitch.tv/thebeardguys and feel free to ask me there. Thanks very much for watching. My name's Ben. We are the Beard Guys, and I'll see you next time. Oh, get wrecked! Get wrecked, boys. Jesus. I just wanted to drop you all a quick message to tell you about our PUBG creator code. As a PUBG partner, we have a creator code which you can add to your account, which means whenever you purchase anything in game, PUBG will give us a commission. Whether you're buying season passes, G-Coin bundles, or anything else that requires cash in PUBG, if you have our code added, then you'll be helping us out without costing yourself a penny extra. It's a great way to support the channel, and it really does help keep us making PUBG content for you. Plus, it's easy to set up and you'll only ever have to do it once. To add our code, first visit accounts.pubg.com and then log in or create an account. Once you've logged in, connect your Xbox, PlayStation or Steam account on the linked accounts tab, then go to the Creator Appreciation Program section and type the Beard Guys into the box or find us from the drop-down list. Then just click submit and you're all done. A massive thank you to everybody who has used our code. Your support is absolutely vital for us and it really makes a huge difference.